Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And this is going to be such a fun episode. I have been looking forward to this for weeks. Our guest today is Danielle Orsino. She is a competitive martial artist, licensed nurse, fantasy author, and cosplayer who was inspired to write her fantasy series by a patient who needed a distraction during IV therapy. She has also been dubbed the new Fabio of Fantasy, and she loves exploring the world of writing and exposing the underbelly of the publishing industry at the same time. Danielle, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here today.
You have such a fascinating story, and I would have to say that you are a woman after my own heart because here you are, you're a martial artist, you're in the medical community, you're a redhead, you're a writer. I
Mhm.
mean, it's just like everything just kind of aligned. So I know, isn't it great? So I'm so happy to finally meet you, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to meet you. At the minute I saw you, I was like, oh, she's a girl after my own heart. Love it.
Yep, there you go. Cosmic connection. So, first of all, I want you to share your story of how you became a writer, got interested in writing from that patient and the IV treatment. But before you even start there, I didn't know what cosplay it was. So, if you could explain it to the audience, and for those who are listening on the podcast, the YouTube audience can see you, so they'll get an idea of what that is. But just go ahead and explain what that is.
Cosplay is pretty much an expression of fandom. It's your own self-expression of fandom. So if you are, let's say, a Marvel fan or a
Mhm.
DC comic book fan, you'll take your favorite character and just bring it to life in your expression of it. So let's say you love the character of Gambit and you're a woman, you may gender bend that character of Gambit and then make it your own.
Mhm.
So, like I said, if you're a woman and it's a male character, you'll make it yours and dress up as that character. Wonder Woman, I tend to dress up a lot as Wonder Woman. So I might take an expression of her and do her mid change. So I might wear a white button down, put the corset on underneath, hair
Mhm.
half down, glasses on, and I'm kind of Wonder Woman mid spin. I might do something, a play on that. Or I've
Mhm.
seen it done Wonder Woman steampunk era. So you can kind of take it and make it generational, genre like, and just do different versions of the character and make it your own.
Mhm. How fun.
It's a great way to just express yourself and kind of look for a release and a little bit of escape from reality.
Well, we all need that.
Mm.
So was this something that you were doing even before you started writing, or did this come to play once you became a writer?
Oh, I've been cosplaying for years. I was doing it before I really knew what cosplay was. I was
Hmm.
actually cosplaying, but I've been to all
Hmm.
the Comic Cons, I've done all the superhero thing. But the funny thing was, I cosplayed, like I said before I knew it was cosplaying, on my green belt test because it was the first test I had to break boards at. And so I thought I needed a little extra help. I was so nervous about breaking boards. So I took the Wonder Girl outfit that Deborah Winger wore when she was Drusilla on the Linda Carter series, and I made it and wore it under my uniform as
Nice.
my little, like, hey, here's my little, gift to myself. Like, I'm going to do this. And my instructor caught me. So he knew I was a big Wonder Woman fan. And as I was going, he saw the flash of red and blue. And he looked at me and he's like, and he called me up to the desk and he's like, come here. And I went out, he goes, is that a Wonder Woman outfit underneath your dobok? And I looked at him, I said, first of all, it's Wonder Girl and it's Drusilla. It's not Donna Troy. And I went into this big rant about it. And he just looked at me, he goes, Danielle, stop, stop, stop. He's like, just what are you wearing? And I kind of opened it up and I was like, it's Wonder Girl. And he's like, are there bracelets under there? I was like, no, I left the bracelets in my locker because I didn't want them to break. And then
Hmm.
I showed, like, I pulled the side of my pant down a little bit and he saw that I had a golden lasso, which was pretty much just like Christmas ribbon.
Hmm.
And he's like, you kidding me, right? I'm like, no, I'm really nervous about breaking the boards. And he's like, the bracelets are in your locker. I was like, yeah, he's like, I can't believe I'm going to say this. He's like, go get the bracelets before I change my mind. Hurry up, go get the bracelets. And I went in, I got my bracelets. I came back and he's like, all right, just break the board. He's like, you better break it on your first try. He's like, I'm just telling you right now. He's like, you better break it. Because if you didn't break the board, you didn't pass. And
Right.
I was just so nervous because this made me an intermediate level. And for
Hmm.
competing, I would go up a level. And I broke everything and it was great and it was wonderful. But that was really my first cosplay because when you cosplay, it's not dressing up during Halloween. It's going outside of Halloween. So
Hmm.
that was really my first cosplay technically. And, I made everything and did it. So that was my first shot. And then I kind of never went back.
I'm not sure I would know what to say if my sensei said, "Let me see what you have underneath your gi."
Yeah. It was
Would
one
you?
of those moments where I was like, "Excuse me," but then I knew what he was talking about because it was
Right.
like, we always wore black or white underneath it, and you could
Hmm.
see the red and blue, and I was like, "Well, there it is." I was busted, so I'm like, "Well," but I had to
Hmm.
do something. I needed a little extra step of confidence, so I went with Wonder Girl.
Exactly. And I think that's a really good way to get some confidence. I mean, it's not harming anybody. And it's amazing how one small change can really have an impact on your, I want to say performance, but that's not really, I don't consider martial arts a performance, but
Mhm.
you are performing a technique and you're trying to break boards. And that's not the easiest thing in the world to do.
No, not when it's your first time and you're in front of people and
Hmm.
you're being judged either way. And we had the head of our organization there for the first time. So it was
Oh,
it was a big deal. For
yeah.
me it was a big deal. I had just started competing. So, I was really trying to make an impression and let
Hmm.
him know why I had been winning. My
Hmm.
head of our organization was a very, very difficult man. So for me, it was really like it was a trick pony kind of moment. I was a show
Hmm.
pony and
Hmm.
I was nervous. So I needed a little extra boost. And I thought instead of being Wonder Woman, I wanted to be the sidekick.
Hmm.
It was just one of those kind of things. So I went with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's amazing how the heads of the organizations typically are a little difficult.
He was, let me put it like this in my book, in Birth of Fae Locked Out of Heaven, the bishops are the subverters of Queen Aurora, and this man's name was Mr. Bishop. So the bishops were named after him, and there was a good reason for all of it. So,
I really totally understand. So,
yeah.
when did you start martial arts and why did you start? How old were you when you decided, hey, I think martial arts is something I want to do?
I was 19, I believe.
Wow.
I did not start it because, oh, I want to do martial arts. That's great. No, it was a bet with my father. I wanted to go to New Orleans with my best friend, Jen. I had never been on spring break or anything like that. And I asked my dad, and my dad looked at me like I grew another head. And then he did, the typical dad, like Jedi mind trick. And he was like, okay, yeah, you can go, except. And I was like, okay, except what? He's like, you need to get your yellow belt. And he knew, the gym that I went to, he's like, from Mr. McLaughlin. He's like, in Taekwondo. He's like, and then I'll let you go. Because his whole thing was, I'm not letting my 18, 19-year-old daughter go with her best friend from I mean, I knew Jen from sixth grade. And
Hmm.
so he kind of already knew the trouble we'd get into. And he's like, I'm not letting you go. So his thought was she's never going to get it. But even if she does, she learns some self defense. So, like,
Right.
it's a win win on his part. So he's like, yeah, you get your yellow belt and I'll let you go. And
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, yeah, how difficult could this be? And so I walked into the gym and I went walking into this Taekwondo class and I did everything wrong that you should do.
Hmm.
I wore low rise sweatpants and a crop top, chew gum,
Oh,
walked right in front of the entire line,
oh my
including the
God.
black belts, stood at the end with the black belts, hands on my hips, chewing gum, and just stood there. And the black belts said nothing because they knew. And Mr. McLaughlin walked in, and there I am chewing gum. And he's like, and you are? And I was like, yeah, I'm here to learn some karate, knowing it was Taekwondo, but I didn't care. And he was like, you should be standing at the other end. And I looked, and there were two or three kids, and they were like blue belts, these kids. And I was like, yeah, the kids are down there. I'm with the adults. And he just looked at me and he just went, oh, goody. And he took a big deep breath. And I was like, and you're John? And he looked
Mm.
and he went, oh, yeah. And he went, come here. And my friend Jen was with me. And Jen literally was like, yeah, I'm out of here. And she just walked out. And I went with him and he was like, can you do a push up? And we were on like this multi purpose aerobic
Hmm.
floor,
Hmm.
hardwood. And I went, yeah. And I was like, and I don't do girly ones. And he went, oh, of course you don't. And he's like, okay. He's like, get down and do a push up. And I did a push up. And he went, can you do ones on your knuckles? And I was like, sure. I did one. And then he's like, good, hold it. And I kind of, my back slumped and I went, what? And he's like, hold it. So I held it and he just walked away to start class. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, just hold it for a minute. And he started class and I'm holding it. And I'm like, where's he go? And something in me just said, keep holding it. And then my arm started shaking. I started sweating. And he walked back and he got down like face to face with me. And he's like, here's the deal, honey.
Oof,
He's like,
honey.
you want to keep learning? He's like, you're going to go to the locker room, wash the makeup off your face, spit your gum out, get a shirt that actually covers your belly button. He's like, and come back and be ready to learn. He's like, because one of us could leave here in a body bag, and I guarantee it's not going to be me. He said, so you will either be my greatest accomplishment or my greatest failure. And I just remember looking at him shaking and going, yes. And he's like, yes. And I was like, sensei? He's like, no, no, no. That's Japanese. We're Korean. We do Taekwondo. He's like, I'm Sabanim. And I was like, stop. He's like, just say sir. And I'm like, sir. And he's like, go fast. And I remember running out of there like a bunny, buying a t-shirt, washing my makeup, like putting my hair back, the whole thing, and running back. And he was so shocked I returned. Like he couldn't believe I came back. And he literally, he's like, oh, you came back. And I was standing at attention. I was like, yes, sir. And he was like, oh. He's like, all right, you want to learn? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, oh. And he was very like, okay. And I learned like a stretch kick, a front snap kick, and a down block. Mm-hmm. And I practiced nonstop till the next class. And I came back ready to go. And he was like, we might have something. Like he was very much like, you're not half bad. And I was like, I might want to do this. This is kind of cool. Let's keep going. When I started, that man had no gray hair. When I left 10 years later, there was a lot of gray hair.
I can imagine
that. But I only paid for 1 month of class. After that, in 10 years, I never paid again. Mm-hmm. And that's when, I was like, oh, okay, there's something here. And it just grew. I didn't go in there thinking, I'm going to do martial arts. I'm going to get my black belt, blah, blah, blah. No, nothing like that. I didn't go set to compete, nothing. It just all kind of progressed organically.
So I'm wondering, were you that interested in taking the art or studying the art, or were you more interested in, I have to do this to go to New Orleans?
Oh, I have to do this to go to New Orleans. There was no, that's how it started. As it progressed, I became more like, this is fun. This is as close to Wonder Woman and Kato as I'm ever going to get. I'm becoming that. Maybe I'm better at this than I think. Like because I never considered myself an athletic person, but as it went on, it called to my ballet background, which I had started when I was like 5. So I thought, I can actually do this. This is kind of cool. I can move. It was all just kind of clicking. And I thought it was hard, but I kept hearing it should be harder. And I'm like, okay, it's challenging me physically, but I'm getting it. And everybody would look at me and go, it took me this long to get it. How come you're getting it? And I'm like, I don't know. It's okay. Because it felt hard to me, like it was physically challenging, but it was clicking and I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, okay, like I got a round kick and I was pivoting by week 2. And I'm like, okay. And I liked being there. Like class went 3 hours. I wasn't like, oh, when's this going to be over? I'm like, all right, when we learn in the next form, let's go. I'm done with Chunji. What are we doing next? Let's go. When am I getting Dosan? When am I getting Penguin? I was like, come on, let's move. And he was like, okay. I'm like, yeah, I want to learn the size. I want to learn this. I want the fan. Like I was just naming weapons. And he was like, how have you done these? And I'm like, oh, I looked them up. I bought this book. I bought, Mr. Cho's book. I did this. And he's like, okay, he's like, you're progressing. So I just liked it. But I was still thinking I'm going to New Orleans.
Right.
That had not left my mind. That was not,
and of course you did go.
Oh yes, I went to New Orleans and I wound up using it. So it all worked out. Your
father is a wise man.
Yeah, I didn't use anything crazy. The one thing Mr. McLaughlin taught me very early on was he said, he was like, I know there's going to be a problem with you already. And he taught me, about breaking the grip and bending fingers back.
Yeah.
And I wound up breaking someone's pinky there, but I stood there for like 5 minutes going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. A drunk guy came up to me and Jen, put his arms around us, around our shoulders and said, come on, girls, we're going back to my place to party. And I was like, no, thank you. And I dipped my head out. And then he almost did like a headlock around Jen and just started walking. And I noticed her feet were dragging. And I literally stood there for like, it was probably 30 seconds going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. What do I do? What do I do? And so I ran up ahead of him and I went, stop, like Bugs Bunny, chest out, like, here I am. And he was so drunk, he was wobbling on his feet. And Jen could barely lift her head up. And I see her kind of looking up through her eyebrows at me, like, do something. And he's like, what? And he's slurring. And I just looked at his grip and I just took his pinky and wrenched it back. And you heard crack. And he's like, oh, and he releases her and I just pushed him. And she looked at me, she went, that was amazing. Now what? And I went, I don't know. I haven't learned the next step. Run. And she went, good enough. And we just took off running down Bourbon Street and ran into a bar and literally like went to the back and hid. And she was like, that was so cool. I'm like, but I stood there for 30 seconds going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And she's like, that was great. I'm like, I really don't, my mind went blank on there was no like, I'm going to kick him. I'm going to do this.
Right.
And we're going to do like a jump front. It was just more like, and I was like, run. I don't know. And she's like, I think you broke his finger. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I just looked at the pinky and I was like, that's the weakest part. Grab that. Good job. Like the Wonder Woman moment, there was no lasso of truth. There was no bullet block. I just freaked out. And I'm like, that's as good as it got.
But you did do something. And you did have that tool underneath your belt. So you did have something, and it was very, very effective. And to be fair to yourself, you hadn't been studying for 10 years at that point. You had only been in the gym how many weeks, right?
Oh, I was a couple months, I mean, it was not long. And
when you went back after your trip to New Orleans, did you share the story with him?
I shared it with Mr. McLaughlin, and he wanted to pummel me. Because he was like, you should have called for help. He's like, what were you doing? He's like, this guy could have had a weapon. I got a whole lecture about what I did wrong. Man. And then he was like, but I'm still proud you reacted. But he's like, you were outmanned. You were outgunned at that point. And I was like, and he said, but you did something. That was still his point. He's like, you still did something, but he's like, in a situation, he's like, you call for help. He's like, you're on a crowded street. Somebody could have helped you. And he's like, you don't have to be Wonder Woman all the time because you don't know the situations you're walking into. And I got what he was saying, because he was also like, you've been here like 6 months. What are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know. I was like, my friend was in trouble. I reacted, but I got like the typical, instructor lecture, which I would get, I would get several times during my time there, of don't be Wonder Woman, Danielle. Like, you never know the situations you're getting yourself into and stuff like that. But, as I got older, I figured it out. I was 19.
Yeah. On the other hand, you could have called for help and got absolutely no reaction and no response. You don't know.
No. So I just reacted, and I was still like, I get a point. I was still like, one for me.
Okay. I didn't realize that you were a ballet dancer. I knew that you had a dance background, but you did ballet.
My dad put me in ballet. I must have been maybe 4 or 5 years old, because he said I was just a clumsy kid. And he said, maybe this will help you. And I took ballet for years. And he said, all it did was make me fall prettier. I didn't do much. I tried, so I took it up till I remember being all through grade school and still taking it. And it clicked, but it didn't. I was always told I didn't have the right body type. I wasn't tall enough. So eventually it just kind of fell out of favor with me. And that's where I kind of got the complex that I wasn't athletic. Because, it doesn't really, now I think there's a different attitude toward dancers is, yes, they're athletic. But when I was growing up, that wasn't part of it. It wasn't like, oh, you're athletic if you're a dancer. And I just, like I said, I always heard you're too short. You don't have the body type. So I just kind of moved away from it.
So when did you become a nurse, and why did you become a nurse? What was it about the medical profession that was calling you?
During high school, I thought I wanted to go into the medical profession. I was kind of debating med school and going back and forth on it. But really during martial arts, I had many injuries, and I kept thinking, this might be something. And after you've had several injuries, you get the Eastern Western philosophies. And so I decided there's more to this. And maybe if I study nursing, I can kind of bridge this gap. And I knew I wanted to work to a mid-level provider, But because of martial arts, I thought you have to learn it like a belt system. So I went, got my medical assistant first, got phlebotomy, medical assistant, because I looked at it like white belts, in beginner level, intermediate level, mid-level, and kind of looked at it that way. So I started at phlebotomy, medical assistant, nursing, and thought, okay, I'm going to go to physician assistant, possibly an NP. So that's why I kind of did it that way, and thought, I've had these injuries, I could probably help somebody, and then decide where to go. So it was more injury, martial art based, and thought, and Wonder Woman was a nurse too. So that was probably, playing somewhere back in my head a little bit. All roads lead back to Wonder Woman. It's like 6 degrees of separation, Kevin Bacon, 6 degrees of Wonder Woman separation, and worked it up that way, and thought, it was also the logical choice in a way. I couldn't compete my whole life. I didn't want to open up a school. So, this seemed like the best way to go.
So when you did start, you went to nursing school and you're working as a nurse, did you ever imagine down the road that you would be leaving the medical profession to do what you're doing now? I find that fascinating.
Oh, no, I never, not in a million years. I was laser focused that I was going to be a PA or NP. I mean, laser focused. I was finishing my bachelor's in kinesiology, and then I was taking my prereqs for NP or physician assistant school. I was actually already in the CASPA is the platform for physician assistant. So you have to apply to the programs, and they have all the prereqs up. I was already taking them for a bunch of different programs. I mean, I was laser focused. There was nothing. My deal was I was either going into Lyme disease specialty, like research, or I was going to pump a bunch of faces up a Restylane in Westchester County. That's what I was doing. There was no getting out of it. I had already done a dermatology rotation for specialty. This is where I was going. I already saw that. There was nothing that was going to get me away from this. I had already written a paper while I was in nursing school on multiple sclerosis. So neurology was kind of sitting back there. Maybe I'll do that. I was doing helmet research, designing helmets, possibly for the NFL. I was in it. So there was nothing that was taking me away from medical. I thought, and even when I went to my first physician assistant school program interview, my helmet was presented, and they were like, "Oh, have you thought about going into bioengineering and this, And I was like, "Yeah, maybe." There was nothing taking me away. So I did not think, when I met my patient that inspired all this, he was my first stick at the Lyme disease clinic I was working at. And we would talk football and everything, but I didn't think, oh yeah, you're going to be the one that leads me astray.
Right.
No,
right.
Not in a million years. No, not at all.
Did he ever know that he was the one that pretty much changed your life path?
Yeah, we talk every day. We are still friends to this very day.
Oh, I'm
He's
glad.
probably one of my best friends. Yes, he knows 100%. He's involved in the book still. So yes, he knows. We joke about it. He often asks me when his literary persona comes out in volume 2 of the series. So he keeps joking, when is Agent Graham coming out? Because that's when he kind of fully steps into the spotlight in that sense. But yes, he knows. He was really a cheerleader for all of this. He was the one who was telling me, you got to go write this down. You got to go write this down. And I'm like, no, I'm going to PA school. Leave me alone. I'm doing this. And he was like, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. So yes, he's aware. He's very much aware.
I'm happy about that. So tell us about that very first time, that first day that you had to distract him.
What had happened was he had been dripping. He had been doing IV therapy. And the way it worked at this clinic was the doctor was very aggressive with Lyme disease treatment. One of the most. You dripped every day, anywhere from a half hour to 2 hours. Wow. Even on holidays, we were open. I was the nurse on holidays. That's what I was hired for. So there was no getting around it. He had moved his life from Pennsylvania to Westchester County. And he had been there about a year and a half. And finally he was like, I have to get home. I have to go back to work. I've got things to do. So the deal he had struck with the doctor was, I will drive 5 hours on a Wednesday, drip for 2, turn around and go home. I will then return on Friday, drip Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday morning, and go back home.
Wow.
They had agreed to this. I knew it wasn't going to last, but I was like, okay, I'll stay out of it. So on Wednesdays, I was the patient doctor liaison, and I would see all the sick patients. So I kind of switched my schedule a little bit. So I would be there sometimes when he came in. And so he had maybe been doing it for about 3 weeks, this driving thing. And I knew, could just tell, like, he was not happy. So he sat in the chair and he said, Danny, I just can't do this anymore. Like, I'm out. And I said, well, if you stop, you're going to backslide. And he's like, yeah, I just don't want to. So he said, distract me, do something, keep me in this chair. I don't want to do this anymore. So I said, okay, tell me something about yourself. Like something you haven't told me, give me something. So he said, well, I was recruited by the CIA out of college. And I went, how did you keep that a secret this whole time? I'm like, cool. So I said, I'm like, we could have found out what was in Roswell. And I went down the whole conspiracy theory rabbit hole. And he went, no, it was for the Trends and Intentions Division of the CIA. He's like, basically, I just would have been an analysis. He's like, nothing cool. And I'm like, still, you would have been a secret agent, man, And we made some jokes. And then I said, well, you know where Lyme disease comes from? And he goes, Plum Island. Once again, Project Paperclip. We went down the conspiracy theory. And I went, no. Don't know why I said this. To this day, I can't figure it out because I wasn't reading any books about the Fae. I just said, no, the Fae. And he went, the who? And I was like, fairies. And he was like, no, I don't know that. And I'm like, yeah, I said, and he's like, who are the fairies? And I said, you're a big secret agent, man. I'm like, you're a CIA guy. I was like, I know why you're really here. And he went, oh, well, why is that? And I'm like, because you want to know if the nurse running this facility is really a Fae human hybrid. And he kind of sat back in his chair and he went, okay. And I was like, you're undercover. And he went, okay. And he's like, well, tell me who they are anyway. And I was like, they're angels that were locked out of heaven from their creator in Lucifer. And I'm just making it up. And he goes, okay, yeah. He's like, yeah, I'm a CIA agent. And we just started kind of joking. And so I just started telling him a story, just put him in it, and just made this story up about this nurse and the CIA agent. And she's really a Fae and this whole thing. And I'm just making it up. And so every day he'd come in and I would just tell him another chapter off the top of my head. And if something happened in the IV room, I'd put it in the story and make it a part of it. And I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm writing a book. I was just like, all right. So I kept making it up. And he just was like, you need to go home and write this down. And I'm like, no, once again, I am applying to PA school. I'm going to pump some faces full of Restylane and make some money. You don't understand what I've spent too much money on my degree. I need to make that back. And he was like, okay. And he just kind of looked at me like, yeah, sure. He was kind of laughing at me like, yeah, sure. Like he knew what was really going to happen. And he would just bother me every day. Go home and write this down. He's like, listen to me. And soon other patients started kind of listening to what I was saying. And they were just like, well, then what happened? And I'm like, I don't know. The Dark Fae King had a big black dragon because the Labrador would walk in and he was black. And I'm like, that's how and we just kind of kept going. And then some situations medically happened in the IV room where I had to leave it. I wound up I went into anaphylactic shock after a needle stick. And yeah, I had somebody brought we had a little girl in the IV room and she was adorable and I loved her. And we would play games. Like she would help me put tubes away, empty tubes. Like, she liked colors on the lobotomy tubes. Right. So sometimes she'd put them in like rainbow order. We'd do little things. And one day I was taking a needle out, an IV needle, and she came by and slapped me, thinking, we were playing.
Right.
But she hit me behind the knee. Not she was really little. And I fell back because she just buckled the knee. But I was pulling it out. And I fell back and I didn't know where she was. And I was like, this needle, I can't let it scratch her. And I couldn't, it was jammed. I couldn't close it. Went in my hand. It's her or me. I'm going to pick me.
Right.
One of those. So they had to treat me with Herceptin. It's a cephalosporin. I was treated 2 days later. It was the very drug I had been mixing. I had been getting hives a little rough to breathe down there days, but I thought it's because we were in a basement and that's what the doctor said.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a latex allergy, and she said somebody's using latex gloves. So they thought they just weren't cleaning up. That IV was going for maybe 2 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and my lungs closed up like a straw. I couldn't breathe. I went into anaphylactic shock right then and there and almost died. Saw an allergist, and he said, "You are so allergic to this drug." He said, "and you are allergic to the entire group of cephalosporins." He's like, "You are a
Wow.
girl allergic to peanuts in a peanut butter making factory." He's like, "How have you survived a year and a half?" He's like, "I don't know." And I'm like, okay. It took an immense amount of epinephrine to get me out, whatever. I went
Jeez.
back like an idiot
Jeez.
because I cared so much for my patients. And I thought, they were like, "Oh, we're going to mix, we're going to premix. We put all these safety precautions in." A couple months
Mm.
later, went back into a loop due to an accident. Somebody spilt some Merceptin, didn't clean it properly, went back
Oh,
into a loop, and I had to leave. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I had to leave. I was stuck in a loop for 5 days. I was on prednisone, pushes, IV. It was horrible. So I went into research instead. But that was the universe throwing the brick, going, "No, you're out." What
mm-hmm.
I didn't know is it would affect my physician assistant school applications. So I decided to start writing the books at that point. But I was already in the cycle. So I was doing my interviews, doing all this great stuff. And finally I get into a program, and they look at they have to look at all your physicals, and they see cephalosporins, anaphylaxis. And one school calls me that I get into and says, "No, no, 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 can't have you, because if you have to do an ER rotation, and God forbid you have to bedside mix, or you have a
Mm-hmm.
choice to administer this drug or another, and you have to pick the other. No, we can't take you." And I'm like, "I worked all this time and you're telling me." So one school says no. Yale says, "Yes, we'll figure a way around it. We'll work something out. We can do remote. We're doing this new remote program, blah, 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 but you can't have any financial aid." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, what?" They're like, "What?"
Jeez.
And they're like, "But we're Yale." I'm like, "But you're 222,000. No, no, no. Oh, but we're going to do a remote program. We're going to do this." And they're like, "It's a pilot program for New York State." No.
But
The other
even,
school,
I do
yeah,
have a question though. Even if it's a remote program, once you graduated, you would be working in the field and would still have that exposure or possible exposure to the drugs.
even with remote, I still had to go on campus every semester for 2 weeks.
Okay.
So I was still going to have some, but they were trying to limit it. It was a whole thing, but there was no financial aid because it was a new
Right.
pilot program.
Jeez.
So I had to put that aside. So then one school, I got in, and then they found out I had sold the book, or I was in the process. I was being accepted possibly by one of the big five publishers in the metaphysical division. And then they informed me that if the book comes out during my 2 years in the program, I am technically in violation of their employment agreement, because they said, "Well, you assume that you would have to promote the book." I said, "Well, I guess." I'm like, "But I would work that out." And they
Mhm.
said, and the guy says, "Look, off the record," he said, "would I personally come after you for it?" He's like, "No." He said, "Can I tell you that one of the doctors or one of the teachers, professors, never wanted to be an author and doesn't have a wild hair up their ass?" He's
Mm-hmm.
like, "No." He said, "Therefore, it's a $30,000 fine." He's like, "All your student loans go in default and you're kicked out of the program." And I looked at him, I said, "I'm sorry, what?" Like, I was like, you know, he's like, "Honey," he's like, "I remember you." He goes, "You got bright red hair." He goes, "And you wore a blue Smurf blue power suit to your interview." I went, "Yeah, that was me." Like, it was one of those, yeah. He goes, "We interviewed 300 people." He's like, "You stuck out." I went, "Okay, I did my job then." He's like, "Yeah, I remember you, sweetie." He's like, he's like, "It could happen." He said, "If it's brought to my attention," he's
Mm-hmm.
like, "you're in violation." I went, "Okay." He goes, "And that's if it comes out in the 2 years." I said, "Well, it would be slated to come out." I said, he goes, "Even if it comes out the last week of class, He said, if somebody brings it to me and says she's in violation, he goes, you are. He says, this is what I'm going to tell you. He goes, totally off the record. I went, yeah. He goes, bet on red. Go do your books. And I went, okay. And he's like, I'm just telling you. So I went, all right. So I took it all in, and I had my acceptance letter, which said, the school's name, med school. And I went, all right, I've been waiting this long. And I still did not go with that publishing company, which is kind of funny all on its own. But I called my dad up, took a picture of the med school acceptance letter, sent it to him. And I said, does this count as getting into med school? And he read it and he goes, yeah, you did it. And I said, great. I'm going to go become an author and write a book about fairies. Love you. Bye. Click. And waited. Phone rang, picked it up. I went, hi, Dad. And he went, I'm sorry. What did you say? He was like, you're going to go write a book about what? And I was like, so, and I explained it. And he went, okay. And I said, and the school is $180,000. And I have to give a deposit of like 20 grand today in order to secure my spot. And he went, uh-huh. And I said, and I can't write off student loans anymore, like, because the law had changed. And he went, 180 grand? I said, yeah. And if the book comes out, and I explained everything, he went, oh, have fun writing about fairies, babe. Love you. Bye.
Yeah. Good luck with
like,
that. I support you 110%.
Done deal. So that's kind of where it all went. And now I'm an author.
Well, you're not just an author. You're an author of 4 books. 5 maybe.
Yes.
Is the 5th one out yet?
The 5th one is out in a couple days. Yes.
Holy moly. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your books. Okay, so this is what I want to know. Okay. I want to know, the birth of Faye, but I'm not sure if the birth of Faye, that's the title of the book. And I think that maybe you've already explained the birth of it with the situation in the IV room. But if not, I want to hear about it. I want to hear about, is it Los or Los? Los?
Los. Yes,
Los. And I really want to hear about Carlos.
Carlos. Yeah, everybody loves Carlos. Birth of the Fae is the series. The first book is Locked Out of Heaven. Book 2 is Thine Eyes of Mercy. Book 3, which just won an award for Distinguished Favorite in Fantasy, is From the Ashes. Book 4 is Kingdom Come. And book 5 is A Fae is Done. And then I have a novella, Fire, Ice, Acid, and Heart.
Okay. I just want to stop you right now and emphasize the award for the audience, because that is a really big deal, that there are a ton, and I do mean a ton, of fantasy authors out there. So be able to stand out in that genre and win an award of that, that magnitude and that, distinction is something that I really wanted to emphasize.
Thank you. I literally had tears in my eyes.
I'm sure
that was my first award. I just got it. It was just announced a couple days ago, and I was thrilled. It was NYC's Big Book Award, Distinguished Favorite in Fantasy for 2022. And yeah, I kind of cried a little bit. I will not lie. It was definitely a moment for me, especially with From the Ashes being the 3rd one. I was like, wow. So I was very happy. The premise is, yes, these are angels. There's 2 sects of angels, the virtue angels and the power brigade angels, and they cannot go home. They don't know why. And they then break up into what we know as the Fae, the Court of Light, the Court of Dark, and they become our pantheon of polytheistic gods and goddesses, and what we know throughout history. Egyptian, Roman, Greek, pagan. And they just know that human worship equals power, but how they both go about it, totally different. And a civil war breaks out to get more worshipers. And then they soon learn maybe that's not the way to go. And so we follow them as they just kind of evolve into the Fae. And Fae means Fellowship Aegis of Earth. And so it takes the origin of Fae into a different realm. And we just see them from the beginning of time going on and just trying to adjust to their new lives, being that they are no longer angels. So it takes it all throughout history. Los is my Yorkie Carlos, and he is a chameleon dragon, and he has become a fan favorite. So yes, all the dragons in the book are usually inspired from somebody's pet and someone's dog in some way, shape, or form. But everybody in the book, all the dragons are inspired in some way from a pet, except Lady Penelope is a deer, and she's my other rescue dog. She's my Chiweenie, Penelope. but Los was the first one to go in. He's a chameleon dragon, and he is Carlos the Yorkie. And so he's adorable and lovely. And everything that Los does is something Carlos has done. You know, Los's tongue is too big for his mouth. Carlos's tongue is too big for his mouth. He has big ear feathers. Carlos has these big fluffy ears. So everything is kind of mimicked. He became a chameleon dragon because Carlos does not like baths. He hates baths. So when you say the bath word, Carlos goes running. And when I was trying to decide what dragon he was going to be, I was sitting there going, well, you're not an acid breather. You're not an ice breather. Maybe you're a fire breather. It was kind of noodling it around. It was bath time. And so I said, Carlos, you know, we took the collar off. The minute you take the collar off, he knows. He took off. And so for 10 minutes, we're looking for him. And I'm like, where did this dog go? Like, did he get out? What happened? And his toy bin is knocked over. And Penelope is staring right at it. She's looking at us like, you idiots. And we're looking. Carlos had taken himself, gone into the toy bin, curled up, and was pulling an ET and staring straight ahead. And he blended perfectly. We had walked by this toy bin several times. And so finally, Penelope growled and stared. And she looked at us like, you idiots. And we finally saw him. But he had managed to take the toys and maneuver himself so he looked like a stuffed animal. And so I looked at him, I went, Carlos, I could see you. The dog just ignored me and stared straight ahead. Didn't blink, nothing. And it was like, if I don't move, you can't see me. And finally I got eye level. I was like, I can see you. And I got one quick blink and just kept ignoring me. And I'm like, you little bastard. I'm like, and at that point I went, you're a chameleon. That's what you are. I was like, you're a chameleon dragon. And I pulled him out and he still was like, he was rock solid, like holding that position. And I'm like, the jig is up, dude. Like, you're busted. And I handed him off to my husband and he took him for his bath. And Penelope was looking at me like, you idiots. Really? You
He was just trying to
trotted off.
help you. He was trying to help you develop the character and figure out what you're going to do with the dragon. Yeah.
Inspiration. But that's how he became Los the chameleon dragon. And so then he turned into a little fan favorite. So he's now immortalized in the book.
That's awesome. Okay, now let's talk about your book covers, because that is truly another accomplishment that you have managed to add to your list. So tell the audience about that. I think that's fantastic. And just looking at the covers, I also have another idea for a cover for you, but I will tell you that when we're not recording.
Perfect. I am on the covers. That was not my idea. So, before everybody's like, oh, does she think she's all that? No, that was my publisher, Four Horsemen Publications. Erica Lance and Valerie Willis, when I signed on, they had seen the mock-ups, and the mock-ups were really just typeset. That way, I had this whole idea of doing these blue covers in this ombre of blue because it was going to represent Fae blood and the whole thing. And Valerie was like, okay, that's all right. That's cute. And I said, yeah, for book 2, I'm going to do this light blue with the silver. And I showed it to her and she went, I printed it out because I had sent her the mock-up. And she said, do you know what happens with light blue and silver pearlescent typeset? And I'm like, no. And she goes, okay, under fluorescent lights, it washes out.
Right.
And she said, I was like, oh. And she's like, yeah, nobody will see it. And she actually showed me, like, she went to a Barnes and Nobles and took a picture just to prove to me, like, no one will see this cover. And I went, oh. She's like, in your author file, she's like, you have these pictures of you dressed up as characters. And I went, yeah, I cosplay as my own characters now. And, I was doing this photo shoot for this magazine. She's like, do you own these pictures? I said, yeah. She's like, great. Give me 24 hours. And I'm like, all right, why? And I saw Erica's eyes beam and they knew there was this unspoken, like, and I went, okay. And she said, the dragons, what are you doing with those? I said, I have this illustrator, Pandy Van. She's doing my dragons. And they went, send us the dragons. So I said, okay, sent them. And they said, we'll talk to you in 24 hours. All right. 24 hours later, we had another Zoom meeting. And all of a sudden they pull up book 1. And it's me as Lady Serena the Mermaid and this big white dragon, Raycor, that Pandy had drawn up behind me. And I'm like, what's this? And they said, this is book 1 cover. And I'm like, what are we doing? they said, so we've decided you shall be on the cover of the book series from this point on. And I'm like, okay, but why? And they said, because we just think it's really cool. No one's done this before. And that's what we're going to do. And it was just more like, it wasn't even a discussion. It was like, this is what's happening moving forward. Join us. Come on to this side of the fence, and this is what we're doing. So the discussion we had was, I am not 25. You cannot airbrush me to look 25. And so they said, cool. I said, I want to say, and they were like, no problem. And I said, when the day comes that I can't do this anymore, that you feel like, okay, you know what, Danielle, maybe this isn't like the right, I said, you'll send me a pint of Haagen-Dazs. I'm allowed to yell at you, call you whatever name I want. The next day we call, we make up, everything's cool, no matter what I said the night before. And I will help you pick the next woman to grace the cover moving forward. And they went, cool, high five, we're good. And that was it. And moving forward, I've been on every cover. I make most of the outfits, or another cosplayer. I work with a cosplayer. So the cosplay community is involved. The headpiece that I wear on the cover of book 1 is Miss G Designs, is a big cosplayer, supplier. Everything is always cosplay centric in some way. So somebody's being shown off. But the armor on book 4 of Kingdom Come that Jarvok wears is, the resin I did, skulls, everything. There was talk of me being Jarvok. I had gender bended it and thought of doing it. But the thought was, it might be too vain of playing the guy. So George stepped in. My friend Jacob found him. That's one of his voice lesson students, and he played him. But, there was always this idea of, can you gender bend it? I've dressed up as the male characters before, but, I wanted to spotlight another gentleman and do it. But yeah, I've done all the characters, and we keep moving forward.
They're awesome. So for the audience, definitely go to Danielle's website and look at the book covers and buy some of her books. I mean, the books are they're just fascinating, and the covers are stunning. They're really stunning.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I have to say, I have a photographer, Julia Giulietti, has done the covers, the pictures, and then Jen Kochek does the cover design and puts them in. And then Pandy Van does my dragons. So there's a collaborative effort to make the covers happen. It's not like, oh, it's, there's a lot of people bringing it together. I have makeup artist, Denise Apostle, who does, collaborates with me to make sure the look is right. Because, I got to look like a different fae every time. And that's not exactly easy sometimes to put that together all in itself and then make the outfits. But it's been a lot of fun.
Oh, wait a minute. Did I see one of the book covers, you as a blonde?
Yes, that's the first one. My father didn't even recognize me.
That
is me. Yes, I sent him that cover, and I said, oh, here's the cover for book 1. And he went, oh, it's great. Who's the blonde chick? And I was like, that's your daughter, Dad. And it was one of those, and we were FaceTime, and he went, oh, yeah, no. I went, yeah, that's me.
How
and I was
funny.
like, granted, I got a tail on, but
yeah,
it's me. And he was like, oh yeah, I see it. And I'm like, yeah.
Have you been are you a natural redhead?
No, I'm jet black naturally. I'm like Wednesday Addams black. So
okay.
Yeah, I started dyeing my hair red because I wanted to be like Barbara Gordon and Dark Phoenix and Firestar put together, probably about 10 years ago. And then Queen Aurora is a redhead, just because I thought, oh, it'll be easier to cosplay as her. But it was one of those things. And then the blonde wig, I was not supposed to be in the photo shoot, Lady Serena. My best friend Jen, who inspired Lady Serena, was supposed to be, but due to COVID, she couldn't come up. So that's why I wound up being her in that. And then it just kind of happened. Desdemona, who's on the cover of book 3 from the Ashes, I have a wig on in that. I just happen to have the hood pulled up so you can't see it. But yeah, I'm usually sporting a wig in most of them. And I'm shooting the cover for book 6 in about a month and a half. And I have a blue wig for that, for Asa.
Okay. And I have I think this is the last question I have for you, because I kind of laughed when I saw this. What is a blasphemy list, and why are you on it?
Oh, A blasphemy list is someone who people deem as an enemy of religion, of Christianity.
Ooh.
And unfortunately, I'm on two of them, but I haven't yet gotten a third. So when I'm on a
Keep
third, I feel
trying.
like then, yes, then I've made it. I am on two blasphemy lists as deemed by some Christian groups due to book one, because, like I said, they haven't even gotten a book four, so I don't know what they're complaining about. Wait till they get there. Some people have felt, due to the content in book one, they feel that I'm a person of blasphemy because I have certain religious events that we all know and love from the Bible, where I say a fae is the cause of it, not the creator, as in the Lord Jesus Christ or God. And so they have deemed me as a person of blasphemy and have named me as an enemy of Christianity and have let their feelings be known due to it. And so I have made the blasphemy lists by their committees, councils, whatever they are, groups, and have deemed me an enemy of religion, however that is, because of these events that I claim a fae has completed and not a religious entity. And so they have, decided to either take campaigns out on me or whatever, they've done. I had one group that wanted to petition the Vatican to have the book banned. And the
Wait a
video was
minute.
taken
With
down.
some of the other books that they have out there, they're picking on you?
Yeah, it's funny. It's like, I think sometimes they go after smaller fish because they think it'll be easier.
That's true. That's true. Good point.
They don't have, I don't have, the publicity machine or whatever behind me, or I'm just, smaller. So they feel like they can intimidate me more. I've had acts of violence, threatened against me. I've had death threats. I've had people take pictures of handguns with dates under them. I've had people go on comments, reviews, and say, religion should rise up against me, and religions would be appalled by this book and the premise, and it's ridiculous, or they just try to leave bad reviews. And I just sit here after a while and I go, look, you want to get me with, threaten me with eternal damnation, you're just going to get laughed at, because last time I checked, you don't have that power. But threats of violence, I have to draw the line at. I've had people outside my home taking pictures of me as I walk out. I've been followed since I've moved to the South. When I was in New York, nobody cared. I would get the Instagram messages, which were, the devil should rape you, blah, 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 give us your home address so we can send you a book about how to heal with God. And I sit there and I started finally sending them the same thing. I'm like, Lucifer hasn't told me what realm of hell we're going to live in once we're married. As soon as he does, I'll let you know. But we're registered at Bed Bath & Beyond. Please send towels. That's usually what I reply with, because I'm like, whatever. Once I moved to Charlotte, then it amped up, and I don't know if it's because they have some kind of, mailing list and they're like, oh, person of blasphemy is in your area, look out. But I've gotten to the point where, okay, like it's a fantasy book. It's not real. I'm not saying this stuff happened, but I do laugh because nobody's ever asked me, are you a religious person? Are you a spiritual person? They just make assumptions. And I'm like, I'm not saying any of this happened. Once again, it's a fantasy book.
Fantasy.
That's the key. Make believe right there. But if you really read the book, the Fae are all about the humans making it too hard on themselves in a sense of religion. What they're saying is, you can never live up to these standards. Just be good people. Don't be jerks. Take care of the earth, take care of each other, and you guys will be okay. That's kind of their thing. They do debate organized religion. They have that debate amongst themselves. In book 2, in Thine Eyes of Mercy, Bishop Alwyn meets a woman who feels that she's in a bad position socially because she thinks God must be mad at her. And he tries to tell her, no, there's no God mad at you. You have the magic within yourself to believe in yourself and get yourself out of certain positions, and nobody puts you there. Magic is within you. And she starts to kind of feel a little better And some people even had a problem with that. They were like, and I was like, there's nothing, there's nothing
Wow.
bad about that. So, and he makes a speech about compassion and stuff. So I think some people like to be in their lane and they don't want to hear anything that goes against it. And I just have to say, I'm respectful of all religions. This is just my point of view in a magical setting. Take it for what it's worth and move on. I'm just trying to give people an escape from everyday reality. And that's it. Because there's enough bad news. There's enough stuff going on. We're a divided country as it is. All I'm doing is, my books are not political. The only thing that I will say is my Weeper Army is a bit of a statement on post-traumatic stress because my brother served. That's as political as I get. That's the most political I get. It's more about giving people an escape because I think we all could use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing more gratifying, I think, than curling up with a good book and going into a different reality or escaping from reality, because it's really hard sometimes. So a little bit of fantasy 100%. And a little bit of make-believe, especially as adults, we sure can use that.
And that's kind of that's why when people say, oh, I have a 10-year-old, can they read their book? I kind of go, you know what? This book is for adults. This is your world. And that's why my books are also not 500 pages. My books range anywhere from 180 to maybe 250 because I want you to not feel pressure when you buy the book. Like, I don't want you to look at the book and go, oh my God, look at the size of this. I want you to look at it and go, oh, I can dip my toe in fantasy, because I think fantasy, especially high fantasy, has a bit of a stigma of being these big complex worlds where you're like, okay, I got to learn a magical system. I got to figure this out. I want to be that kind of gateway drug into fantasy where you can go in and you're like, cool, I can kind of read for a week and then return and still know what's going on and not get lost. I like that. And I like the idea of if you wanted to, you could take all of them and binge them. And so I'd rather come out with a book every 4 months, 5 months, and somebody can kind of Netflix it and just binge it. Be like, cool. Or be like, you know what? I finished it. I don't have to worry about her not coming out with a book for 10 years.
Right.
This chick's I know that if I invest in her, she's coming out. It's cool. So, I kind of look at it a little bit differently than most fantasy authors. And if it's thought-provoking at the same time, all the better. But it's more for the adult crowd, because I do get violent. I'm the first one. I'm a martial artist. Of course I'm going to write fight scenes, and of course I'm going to be violent. Come on, this is what I do, guys. Like, are you really that shocked? I might have a touch of romance here, but I'm not going to give you romance because I got a king and queen who are trying to figure out how to rule. They don't have time to swipe right or left. That's not what they do. There's more going on here.
That is so funny.
I'm a little more adult.
I have a really good friend who is a fantasy author, and she's also an RN who worked in the emergency room for years. And she's very shy, very quiet. And our first books actually were released at the same time. So that's how we met each other. And, I bought her book and I was sitting out on the patio. It was August 2016. I'll never forget it. Beautiful day. And I'm sitting in the shade reading this book. And I got to the end of the first chapter and I was like, oh my God, it's the shy ones you really need to look out for. But it was so funny because she was pulling in a lot of her, some of the things she'd seen in the emergency room, which of course, and I think with medical professionals, we have an incredible amount of experiences that it's like, truth is really stranger than fiction. And to weave that into a story is just really powerful.
Yes, 100%. And I do it more as volume 1 is the Fae in the Veil and kind of going through history. Once I get to volume 2, where we get the CIA and I get more medical, and that's where my patient, his literary persona, Agent Graham, comes in. That's where you see the medical explanations for the Fae human hybrids and stuff. And I actually had one of my nursing instructors read it when I was doing it. I said, can you tell me, like, I'm using antidepressants here, I'm doing this. And she went through the medical aspect of it to make sure it was like on. And that's where like the nurse geek comes out in me. And I kind of laugh that, that's the medical side. And that's volume 2, which will come out probably 2023, end of it, 2024. But yeah, that's where it's like stranger than fiction kind of stuff. But it's,
Yeah.
I actually take place in the Lyme disease clinic, and somebody was commenting, and I said, no, what Agent Graham goes through is pretty much what my patient went through. Like
Right. Yeah.
that's the real stuff, you know?
So Danielle, where can people find you? Where can they get a hold of you, contact you? Where can they find your books? Of course, all your links are going to be in the show notes, but I really like to give my guests the opportunity to verbalize it themselves and share
Thank you. I
whatever you
appreciate
have,
that.
whatever else you have to share and promote.
My shameless self-promotion time, like my plug.
Yes. Yes.
You can always find me at birthofthefae.com, and that's FAE.com. You can also find me on Instagram at birthofthefae_novel. And you can see all the reels, all the pictures, all the covers, all that good stuff. Another cool place where all the kids are going to find good books is Bookie Call. It's an app that's kind of like a book dating site for books. And you can swipe right or left, and there you can find Locked Out of Heaven and find out what it's like to date a book before you actually go and purchase it. And it gives you the book profile. So Locked Out of Heaven, you could decide to swipe right or left. Of course, I'm going to tell you to swipe right on it, but you can see what it's like before you purchase it. And then Bookie Call is actually having BookieCon, which is the first metaverse BookieCon. And all your favorite authors will be there. And I think they're giving out actually free tickets. So you might want to check them out on Instagram and see. But yours truly will be there doing their metaverse appearance, along with, I think it is 300 authors that will be there talking about it. So it's pretty cool. So I'd say check them out, and you can check them out on Instagram as well. And those are all the places to find me.
Excellent. Well, Danielle, thank you so much for being here today. It's been a fascinating experience.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate this.
And everybody, thank you for listening. I really appreciate you. And do go to Danielle's website and follow her on Instagram. She has an amazing website. The books are absolutely stunning. The covers are beautiful, and it sounds like a fascinating series. And I know there's going to be a lot more books coming. So make sure that you check them out and get your fantasy fix. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.